The two different systems I'll be using through this video is the online IDE Codio, which provides an integrated development environment through my web browser. I also created an account for the GitLab repository, which is a version control system that will track all my work and save it, in which I have forked over a template for the project to be used in Codio. I also needed to use Google App Engine to run the web application or website in this case. The App Engine provides cloud host on the Google servers which run across multiple servers. I created an application through this medium so that I could link my Codio IDE and later deploy my website on the AppSpot server. Then I created a local server on Codio which would launch my website on the Codio server. There are two ways I could have done this, either through Google App Engine or use the local server. So I added all the website HTML and CSS pages, including all the images and their respective folders. Then, using URL handlers, which essentially allow Codio to run the different file types that is needed, I edited the app.yaml file to enable me to run these type of files. Not only that, but the file types had to be also in specific order for it to work. The local server would then accept any changes made to the files in the static folder. However, those changes cannot be made whilst the server is running, therefore the server had to be stopped and the changes would take place next time that the server is run again. For the security part of the website, I created a login screen that essentially takes the email and password of the user and validates whether or not they are allowed to log into the website or not. So this time, instead of importing the Google App Engine email functionality, I decided to import the users to allow me to log on with my Google App Engine account. First, I add some code to basically get the currently logged in user. However, if we see this locally, there is no logged in user and there is a default user to log in. Then the user can log out of the current page and this will take them straight to the login screen. When this is implemented into my website, the login screen will add a level of security that is needed. It will use my Gmail account as the login, and this means that it's linked to the Google App Engine server constantly. The other thing in security is the security provided by the Google App Engine website itself. When Codio tried to deploy the website, it encountered an error that basically didn't let any application outside of the allowed application to access the Google App Engine. To get around this, I had to set the security of allowed applications to off because I needed Codio to be able to access my Gmail account and the Google App Engine servers. For the database, I created a database that will be linked to my login screen via PHP. The login screen would only allow users that are added to the database and reject any other users. The database will contain the username and passwords of the users that need to be logged in. I created this database using a web application that let me create a database, edit and updated it whenever I needed. To create the database, I started a new database and called it login details. Then once the database was there, I had to obviously populate it since it was empty. To do this, I created a table of login details that would have two columns. The first column would take all of the usernames and the second would take the correct passwords to go along with the usernames. I also had to decide in the creation of the table what type of data would be used for. So for usernames, it will be text, and for the passwords, it will be variable chart. The reason is because the passwords could either be integers or in string form. Once the database is done, I would have then linked it to my login screen, which would have validated which users are allowed and which aren't. In programming, CRUD is to create, read, update, and delete, which refers to all the major functions that are used in relational database applications. The databases can be object-based database, meaning that information is presented in the form of objects as it is used in object-oriented programming. The Relational Database Management System, or RDBMS, is a relational database which is stored in two-dimensional tables. For the table I have started to create, this is the method of database management I have used. It has the benefit of the data being persistent. However, there are some drawbacks, such as the fact that it's complicated to integrate. The integrated database would be shared by a lot of applications and therefore would lead to problems that can impact the other applications sharing it. I have also learned about NoSQL, which is essentially a data store that does not use relational databases and stores data in a very different way. The next part of this video will be showcasing the ability to implement a form, and then once the user has filled out the form, to be sent to an appropriate email address. The first part of this is to understand what we need to display the form itself in the first place. That's why in the context of Codio, the first step is to create the actual feedback form. This is a simple form in which the action attribute of the form will send data to the web server root. Once this is done, I created the content area via a division via HTML code. When the project is run, it will show the form on the local web server of Codio. However, when we try to use it, we can't. The reason for this is because we hadn't implemented the post method, which determines what exactly to do with the data entered and how to use the form submit button. The current method was using the getSelf handler. Now, to respond to it, we use the postSelf. Now we need to call the feedback form and decide what to do with it. So I used the self.request.get to get the content that the user had written in the feedback form. Then I stored the feedback comment in a variable to use it later. I then redirected the user to a message telling them that their message was sent, to send this comment via email. However, I had to import the Google App Engine email functionality and then use this to send the message to whatever email address I specified. For inputting the data, I essentially needed to create validations to make sure that as the user typed their inputs, it would repeatedly check that the text boxes as the user entered the data and let them to make a change in case something that went wrong. To do this, I created a JavaScript code which would be used in my HTML to validate the details of a user. This script would allow me to essentially check whether or not the user has entered the correct data type on each text box of the form they have to fill out. It also checks if each of the text boxes have been left empty. Once this has been checked, the script then outputs an error message which tells the user what he or she has done.